It was a vintage Ben Roethlisberger night in Pittsburgh as Ben Roethlisberger started the Steelers' third preseason game, played well in the Steelers' third preseason game, and led the Steelers on 2 touchdown drives in their third preseason game. This is en route to a Pittsburgh Steelers victory over the Detroit Lions as the Steelers remain undefeated in preseason play. He then gave the ball back to Mason Rudolph and even Dwayne Haskins at the end. But Ben Roethlisberger playing well and playing well with the first team offense as he learns a new system and new offense. Certainly a major takeaway from this game. I'm Mike Asti, and this is a Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am joining you from an undisclosed location here inside the Heinz Field press box, mask still on because of the new NFL media policies and the Heinz Field media policies. I'm not eating something right now. I'm not drinking something right now while I'm hosting this show. So I do have to still have this mask on. So bear with me if you can fully understand me or not. Nonetheless, though, the Steelers get the win. They dominated most of this game, had to hang on for the win at the end, and Ben played well. Ben Roethlisberger, really, you look at the numbers, there were only a couple incompletions, over 130 passing yards on the day. The 2 touchdowns, of course, no interceptions, wasn't sacked, no real major mistakes from Ben. Did have one deep ball that kind of maybe let sail a little bit, a little underthrown, had to have the receiver go back to it. I believe that was the Deontay. But overall, fans got to be happy with what they saw from Ben Roethlisberger. Again, vintage Ben Roethlisberger, as I said to open up the show here, as many of us in the press box were talking about. That looked to be even a better Ben than at the end of last year. And he also talked about and told us that he feels a little better. He feels a little healthier, and his arm feels a little stronger going into this season than even he was a season ago. No guest on this one, so feel free to chat along with me here as we're just going to kind of recap the game, give you my takeaways. Of course, Ben playing well, that's a major takeaway. We'll see now how much he plays in the fourth preseason game, as normally doesn't see any time until that final preseason game. Wanting to get more time this year because of the new system. Najee looked good, of course. Pat Fryermuth, another story. My colleague here throughout the Now Network over there at Nittany Sports Now, Corey Geiger, been on his show a bunch with him as well. And he told me immediately, texted me immediately upon the Steelers drafting Pat Fryermuth that he catches everything. Corey's a Steeler fan, covers Penn State, but a Steeler fan, and he was jumping for joy. I heard him on the other end of the phone. I thought my speaker was going to break. So we're seeing that. Pat Fryermuth is catching everything. He's catching everything in practice. He's catching everything now in the game. And Ben, on purpose, throws balls a little away from receivers, usually in practice, sometimes in these preseason games, especially rookies like Fryermuth, to kind of test them to see what their range is. And Fryermuth had to jump up there and get a few, but he put that ball not too high, just a bit high so that nobody else but his lengthy, long-armed tight end, pass-catching tight end had a chance at that football. And, of course, Pat Fryermuth brings in the football for those 2 touchdown receptions. For a while, it looked like Eric Ebron might be a loser because Pat's playing so well and he had a drop early. But then, of course, several catches from him. So receiver-wise, tight end-wise, the passing game, certainly there's reason to have optimism with what's going on with Deontay Johnson in camp and working on his hands. And then Claypool, who Steeler fans, I'm sure, still want to see more from now as he did not suit up despite out there during practice. But then it's about the offensive line because nothing Ben's doing, nothing the offensive game plan is doing, doesn't matter about Fryermuth, Najee Harris, etc. Juju, Deontay Johnson, Claypool when he's out there, if the offensive line can't protect. And honestly, I didn't think the offensive line had a bad day by any means. Again, this is the question mark of this team is how can this offensive line play? How can they play together? Zach Banner banged up for a better part of a year, injured after the Steelers' in the middle of the Steelers' first game of the season last year against the Giants on prime time. Didn't get to see him anything beyond that. And that's after he won a job a season ago. Played well, I thought. Chucks played well, I thought, or at least played better than maybe would have expected. So the offensive line, not great, but certainly playing good enough, certainly playing well in this game. This was the first time really seeing them fully together. Question marks, though, still line up defensively, more in the secondary for the Steelers, especially with Arthur Mallett leaving the game with an injury, that ankle injury. that could ruin the entire position battle going on there. Really, the entire format of that secondary that was very underrated, losing Mike Mitchell, and really losing how it would line up to see who would be the slot corner, who would be more on the outside, etc. Safeties, nickels, all of that. All of that kind of can be changed and moved, and how much you have to rely on Joe Hayden, who looked good, but again, an aging player. All of that, James Pierre, all of that is about where each player, where each DB fits the best. And it certainly appears like Arthur Mallett may have landed himself the starting slot corner position, but leaving this game with an injury, how serious is that ankle injury? Will he be out? Does that lose that job for him? Now that's a question to certainly take away, or several questions to certainly take away from this game. So more questions than answers, I feel like, for the defensive side of the football. Of course, linebacker play mightily improving with the acquisition of Joe Sherbert. But who knows otherwise? Certainly Devin Bush as well. Healthier team. Cam Hayward out there. That was great. Highsmith talked about Cam Hayward being out there and that being such a big deal for him, for these younger players to actually get to play with Cam Hayward, who had not appeared in one of these to this point. How you doing, Vic, there? Again, I want to remind you, this is the Steelers postgame show here for Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, a part of our Pittsburgh postgame edition here on PSL. Hit that subscribe button bottom of this video. Help us get all of our content to you, and find us over there at SteelersNow.com for all of our postgame coverage. We got some videos coming on this channel as well. I just was down there getting some of those interviews and videos for you. Feel free to chat along. I will close up shop here early, as I only have so much time in this press box if you don't chat along quickly. But again, obviously, Ben played well. Ben looked good. That was vintage Ben at times. Looked healthier. His arm looked stronger. That's all a positive, because as much as we can talk about Mason and Haskins, and I'll get there in a second, if Ben goes down, if Ben's not your starter, this season basically is for naught. Yes, Mason maybe looks more comfortable. He says he's more comfortable. I know some fans hate him, but at least got points on the board in this game rather than drives not resulting in points prior in the preseason. And he still, again, has been efficient for the most part. Haskins trying to make some big plays, made some big plays against Philadelphia. In fact, looked great against Philadelphia. Not able to do much in this game or mop-up duty, but eventually did command a little bit of the 2-minute offense. So fans got to see him do that. Certainly not with the ones, though. He's not seen time with the ones this preseason. And again, or with most of the ones cohesively together, he's not got to start. So we'll see going into that fourth preseason game, I'm imagining that's Ben again. But Ben is the guy. Okay, we can argue all day about QB2 and about the future of this team. This team is trying to win now. It's clear they're trying to win now. When you go trade for a veteran Pro Bowl linebacker, they are trying to win now. They're not waiting around. So Kevin Colbert's doing work. He's put these pieces together. They are trying to win now. And say what you want about that, that certainly means Ben Roethlisberger has to be the starting quarterback, and certainly provides you some reason for that optimism based on how he played so far in this game, in this preseason. But of course, nothing guaranteed moving forward. We saw him play serviceable, at least last year, maybe above that at times, and then puttered away down the stretch. So can Ben put it together for an entire season? That's going to be a question mark. He's learning a new offense, but certainly hasn't looked like he has missed a beat, whether it be in practice or now in the preseason with this new offense. So it absolutely appears like he has learned this new offense and that he feels comfortable with this new offense. And he certainly has now a comfortability with Pat Freiermuth, who is a rookie. He loves the long arm receivers. He loves tall receivers. He loves receivers, whether they be tight end or receivers, that catch everything. And that's what Pat Freiermuth is. He catches everything no matter where Ben puts it. So, of course, Juju out there missed a couple blocks, but it's preseason blocks. Certainly better of an inside slot receiver than he is outside. Whether he likes that or not is immaterial. That certainly feels like where he will be fitting in. Certainly what we've seen in the preseason as that inside guy, that slot receiver. Certainly can be great, can be elite at that if that's what he does and doesn't worry about where his money goes on the outside. Of course, that is where you make more money, but he fits more in the inside. Claypool is somebody that obviously was a beast last year, so that's expected again. Deontay Johnson works on his hands, and I think can actually be the number one on this team, has that potential. And then you go all the way down the line with two pass-catching tight ends. They can do two tight end sets. This offense can be explosive, of course, with Najee Harris. It all goes to the offensive line, but it also goes to Ben's play. and it has to be Ben in there. So Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, we can argue that all day, but it's for QB2. And honestly, I will tell you here, and I've been saying this for months, whether Steelers fans want to hear this or not, and maybe this will generate some conversation as I kind of get towards closing up shop on this post-game show. It's clear the Steelers have the QB2 situation solidified. Mason Rudolph entered training camp as QB2 with an edge. Dwayne Haskins had to prove something to this Steelers team, to this Steelers staff, on and off the field after his situation in Washington. And wow, there might be a talent edge there. I certainly think Dwayne Haskins has more talent and maybe a higher ceiling than Mason Rudolph based on NFL film from the Steelers and from the Washington football team, regardless of where he was in the draft and that he was the 15th overall pick and first round, and we get it. Dwayne Haskins hasn't done enough to impress the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are comfortable with Mason Rudolph. They gave him that contract for a reason. Yes, Dwayne Haskins looked great against Philadelphia, but against Dallas in Canton, he looked average. He didn't look like he grabbed any bull by any horns. So, and again, didn't really get a full shot in here, but I think this kind of tells you guys what's going on and what we've been saying, what I've been saying for a while now. There really wasn't that much of a QB2 debate. There really wasn't that much of a QB2 competition from the perspective of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is all that really, really matters here. They have started Mason Rudolph over Dwayne Haskins in every one of these games. So now that Ben started this game, the third preseason game, it was then Mason Rudolph, Dwayne Haskins, and then Josh Dobbs. They released that depth chart less than an hour before the game. First two preseason games, Mason started, then Haskins. Again, Mason is the QB2. Do I want the keys to the Cadillac offered to Mason Rudolph for the future? Probably not. Does he need to be more dynamic and do more, even though he's no longer making mistakes, and certainly at least has become a legitimate backup and a game manager, and certainly looked good even in the Steelers' Week 17 game last year, which I think partly helped the Steelers be comfortable with him? Yeah, absolutely. And they are confident. They are comfortable with him. You need Ben to be your starter to win this year, of course, but neither one of these guys are leading you any promised land this year. And beyond this year, Dwayne Haskins has had to prove more. He looked better at times. Maybe he can be more explosive at times, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are comfortable with Mason Rudolph, and clearly we should stop talking about this, even though I'm sure fans will never. If they do see Mason at all this season, they're going to probably root against them. Some of them will, because they wanted Haskins, but clearly Mason's QB2. I would be shocked if that's not the case. Clearly Mason Rudolph is QB2, and Dwayne Haskins, I don't know, trade bait, something else out there, maybe QB3, maybe Dobbs again is off the roster, maybe Dobbs is running the practice squad, who knows, somebody else might see value in Dobbs. Certainly an incredibly smart man, off this team before after losing a battle to Mason, now back on this team. So again, Dobbs has a role, more as a coach probably in his future in the National Football League, certainly not a player, certainly no starting potential or even QB2 over either one of these two guys, even though he did play well in the preseason game in Canton that I was at. But again, Mason Rudolph is the backup quarterback. That clearly feels to be the case. That clearly does, for him to still be ahead of him on the depth chart at this point, and to ask him not to get any of these starts in the preseason when they do play one more game than everybody else. Certainly telling. Again, I'm Mike Asti, and this is the Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. All our postgame show, my game recap, all the covers throughout this game, our video reactions, all of that over there at Steelers Now. Of course, here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, you can find the video reaction as well. And I will, again, of course, as I see on Twitter, chatters, etc., not enamored with Mason Rudolph. But again, you look at Mason Rudolph numbers here. Let me touch on this really quick here. Let me actually pull up his numbers. It's kind of a makeshift post-game show. I got to be honest here. This isn't the ideal conditions here, having to keep this mask on. I've got a lot of action going on to my right. It's amazing I can focus in on and do this right now. But I wanted to offer something to keep this streak alive. But Mason Rudolph, 13 for 18, 138, 94 quarterback rating. Ben Roethlisberger, 8 for 10, 137, 158. So they both are on the same passing yards. Of course, Ben just money when he got in there, except maybe that one underthrown deep ball. Money otherwise. Dwayne Haskins, 4 for 7, 56 yards, and an 83 quarterback rating. Not much else going on. And again, yes, he had the standout game against Philadelphia in the preseason, but that's all you can cling on to. There were Steeler fans who were calling for Dwayne Haskins to be QB2, were saying he should be the backup, and wanted Mason Rudolph off this team no matter what the Steelers were telling you, no matter what smoke signals they were offering in terms of his contract and what Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin have continuously said about feeling comfortable with him. The second Dwayne Haskins was signed, there were Steelers fans that wanted him to be the QB2. I don't know if it's a hatred for Mason Rudolph or what it is. I'm not saying it's incredibly entertaining football, but he doesn't make mistakes. He does move you downfield. Yes, there's an inability to get you in the end zone there that needs to be worked on, but he's a backup quarterback. So is Dwayne Haskins at this point. Dwayne Haskins has looked, I would say, worse at times more often than Rudolph, even though his ceiling, and he has looked better briefly. So he looked better. Try to make sense of this. He looked better against Philadelphia than Rudolph, of course. It showed me a higher ceiling. He made plays there that Rudolph hasn't made at all in the preseason. But overall, Rudolph has looked better in terms of less likely to make mistakes, managing your offense. And if you're the backup quarterback, this is what Charlie Batch did. If you're the backup quarterback, you don't have to do as much as the starter. If you get in there as the backup and some reason Ben is hurt and it's week 9 or it's the end of the season, and for some reason you're playing in week 16, week 17, like last year in week 17 to end the season, you just want to manage things. You don't want everything to be ruined. If you're the guy the whole season because Ben gets hurt, your season's for naught anyway. It's not like Haskins is going to all of a sudden become a Pro Bowl quarterback. That doesn't likely to be occurring either. And yes, there are times maybe he can make some big plays to go in that direction, and he does have the first-round talent. There's also other times it looked like he's just checking down too much. Tomlin nicknames him Mr. Checkdown, and there's a lack of continuity otherwise. So you can say what you want about evaluating pocket presence, etc. It doesn't matter. Mason Rudolph's the backup quarterback of this team, but this team goes as far as Ben Roethlisberger is going to take them. And if you leave this preseason game evaluating the preseason and how these quarterbacks have played, you might feel good entering the season. Still one more of these left, but Ben Roethlisberger played well in this preseason game, played in the third preseason game, the second to last, more than he normally will play in a preseason, figuring he's going to play next week. And he's learning a new offensive system. So this is different than Brady going from one team to another team, or Favre going from one team to another team, or Peyton Manning going from one team to another team. Usually going with either an offensive system that was similar or completely catered to them. This is not catered to Ben Roethlisberger, okay? Ben Roethlisberger has to basically adjust and adapt to what the Steelers are doing. They welcomed him back when he took less money, and he had to be back. But it's not like they said, we'll do whatever you want. We're going to bring in a guy that fits you, etc. He has to adapt, and he has to fit into what Matt Canada's doing. And Matt Canada, now the offensive coordinator, is doing something new. So this is a new offensive system to be learning and having to deal with. So again, Ben Roethlisberger looked good. He absolutely looked good, but he has to look good. He has to learn a lot more. So this is why you're seeing him in a preseason game like this. If I don't get much more action here, I think I am going to wrap things up here. Again, stick with us on Steelers Now. Stick with us here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe, bottom of this video. We do promise guests and more of these post-game shows throughout the season. In fact, after every one of these, I'm going to do something for you. So I can promise you that. Again, not able to get you much more because of this press box environment right now, but we'll see how this goes. And with the new COVID rules that were just switched up on us, it increased a little bit even more just yesterday. This kind of was the forced issue. Maybe I'll try to eat a pizza while I'm doing this show to be able to do this without my mask on. But nonetheless, masked up here. So I host Mic'd Up in the morning here on PSL. Of course, Mike Drop as my personal show that I have branded on throughout multiple media outlets here in the Pittsburgh market. This now is Masked Up, the Masked Up edition of the Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So feel free to drop some comments in if you couldn't chat along. I will reply in the comment section. You can also follow me at Mike Asti 11. Again, the Steelers won. Doesn't really matter for the preseason, but it's better to win than not. Said that in the game recap. It's certainly better to win than not. But again, it's how these individuals played. It's how the offense looked. It's how the offense looked with more cohesiveness of the first team. More of the first team out there, certainly the offensive line. I think the offensive line, a major question mark this year, certainly the concern. I'm not going to beat any drum and say the offensive line is going to be great. Tons of question marks there, especially on Banner, who hasn't played in a year, even though I do believe in him, and he won that job fair and square a year ago, and there's no bad tape since then. Good tape again today, but a game action that we haven't seen from him for a year. A lot of uncertainty on the O-line. I think they looked good. I think they looked average. I don't think they looked great, but certainly good enough for what went on. They didn't ruin things. Najee Harris, though, did have to make some plays and open up some holes that weren't originally there. But he said that throughout the preseason, he would create those holes if necessary. And we saw that in this game. He certainly did You don't want to ask him to have to do too much or kill the man early in his career, but he's figuring there are going to be some times where the block is not there and he's going to have to make it. We saw a big run from him. We definitely have seen that from Steeler running backs this year. So not even just him, but many Steeler running backs actually were creating and making plays. Balaj as well, making plays in this game, regardless of the O-line. I don't think they were horrendous. I think they were okay, which is, I guess, all you can ask for when it's their first go together. Ben, of course, looked good. Ben certainly looked good. Vintage Ben at times and needed to be good. 8 for 10 again, 137, and a quarterback rating of 158. That's what you want to see from Ben Roethlisberger. But again, question marks around it until we get into the regular season. Mason's your QB2, like it or not. Mason Rudolph is the QB2 of this team and the first backup for this team. That's clear, that's evident. He's done nothing to lose the job, even if Dwayne Haskins maybe looked good in one preseason game with a higher ceiling. It's just the case, guys. So maybe we got to stop debating it. And major question marks around the defense of this team, certainly in the secondary, especially with Arthur Mallett leaving the game with an injury. That could ruin things in terms of the depth chart, in terms of the position battles, in terms of where guys fit in, depending on that situation. So the Steelers win. They remain undefeated in the preseason. They do beat a struggling Lions team. So let's face it, they beat the Eagles. Okay. They beat the Cowboys. Okay. But that didn't include Dak Prescott. That didn't really include Ezekiel Elliott. So what is that? And then the Lions are just going to be a bad team. So again, beating the Lions despite their comeback at the end, it doesn't mean anything. It's not that impressive over a struggling Lions team. But Ben individually looked good. So your major takeaways from this game, positive-wise, Ben looking good with the first team, as he had to do, learning a new offense and getting in there now in some action with that team, with those players in a game. Pat Freiermuth looking as good as advertised, catching everything, as we've said. And again, the running backs looking good, the O-line looking good enough, looking okay, despite still being a major question mark. More question marks maybe at the defense due to some injuries there. Certainly still some position battles to iron out. The punting position might now be what you focus on if it looks like QB2 has been solidified. Presley Harvin III got to have won that beat with the hype he has, but who knows? Jordan Berry certainly has proven himself in the past, and they're both punting the lights out. I cannot imagine they keep two punters, but that might be something to look at in Boswell. Good. Boswell's connecting on kicks. I've been around long enough and covered this team long enough to remember when that was not the case. So that'll do it for this edition of the show, this makeshift post-game show here from, again, this undisclosed location inside the Steelers press box as I'm sitting up here at Heinz Field, still adhering to the max policy. So masked up here on this post-game show. Again, for all of us here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when it means nothing, it's all about the eye test in the preseason, Matt. Absolutely. I agree with you there. But again, for all of us here at Pittsburgh Sports Live, Steelers Now and all throughout the Now family of the network, the Steelers win their third preseason game. They win it 26-20 over the Lions. But again, as the fan alluded to, it does mean nothing. It's all about evaluating the individuals. Ben, check mark. Pat Freiermuth, check mark. Running backs, check mark. O-line, I guess I'll give a check mark for this game, but still a major question mark. Check mark with an exclamation point and a question mark. And then, of course, the defense, not bad until late in the game, but a question mark based on an injury.